Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about Dharmesh Shah. He's the CTO of HubSpot and he's also a very successful VC investor. Now, what's interesting about Dharmesh is even though he's the CTO of a very large publicly traded company, he has no direct reports. And what he does instead to have impact is he picks three big focuses, just three things, and he uses those things to drive change at HubSpot. So why doesn't he have any direct reports? Well, when he started HubSpot with his co-founder Brian, they made an agreement that he would handle, that Brian would handle the CEO responsibilities, and Dharmesh wouldn't have any direct reports. Dharmesh had been a CEO before, and he didn't think he was particularly good at line management. He felt like he's a smart person, so if he invested a lot of time in it, he could get average, but he felt that it wasn't his core competency or something that he was naturally very good at. So here's a clip from the 20 VC podcast where Dharmesh talks more about his leadership style.
I struggle with the word leader because I really think of myself as that. Well, I'll tell you I'll call it my operating style, for lack of a better, and obviously leadership or some sense of it is part of that. There are a few kind of fundamental core attributes to my operating style. One is around transparency. And what I mean by that is that whatever it is that's going on in my head, I share it. Right? It's like, okay, well, here's what I think we should do. Here's the path I think we should take. Here's what I think is broken in the world. Here's, what I think we did well. Here's what I think we didn't do well. And I kind of put it out there. That's kind of the number one thing is transparency. And then kind of combined with that, and it's going to sound weird saying the word because it's a paradox in a sense, but is around having the humility to kind of listen. It's like, okay, if you put the stuff out there, but you have to be kind of open to debate. You have to be accepting of the fact that you don't know all the answers. You haven't figured it all out. Yes, you may have had some experiences. You may even have some data. You may have some more context than someone else. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. And so kind of having the humility to say, I'm still constantly learning. And there's every interaction I ever have with anyone, be it a person or a company, whatever it is, I feel like there's something to be learned there, right? Is having the humility to know that you don't know everything. And we're all kind of on this journey at varying stages. We've picked different paths, but I think that's kind of part of it. And it's both, I kind of value it in myself and I recognize it, and I value it in others. Like the best people I've ever met have a very kind of low ego to accomplishment ratio, right? It's like we all meet lots of people that have accomplished a lot, but then their ego kind of balances out. So the ratio itself is not great. The best people are the ones that have accomplished a lot, but have very little ego in proportion to that.
As I said earlier, Dharmesh focuses on three big things to have an impact at HubSpot. One of the big things he focused on, and is still focused on, is culture. Now, the reason this came up initially is that Dharmesh's co-founder, Brian, asked Dharmesh to look into culture. Initially, Dharmesh was resistant to it because he's an introvert. He doesn't line manage anyone. He didn't think that he would be the best person to lead on culture. However, he eventually agreed and he approached the problem from an engineer's perspective. He used his engineering mind. Here's Dharmesh explaining how he tackled culture at HubSpot.
The culture decks that you put together, what is the process with which you go through to put them together? I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, so there's only one deck. It's called the Culture Code deck. The reason it's called the Culture Code is a lot of people kind of mistake it. It's like, like it's a code of conduct or a moral code or something like that. It is not. The Culture Code was my kind of manifestation of if I could write an operating system, literally write Python code, let's say, to run the company and help make decisions and do these things, this is what it would be, right? And the kind of V1 of it, well, let's take half a step back. On the top three list of things I've learned in 30 plus years now being in the professional world is that culture is a product. culture is a product. So we build a product. If you're a tech company, you build a product for your customers. We all understand that. We understand product management. We understand the importance of getting customer feedback and product market fit and all those things. We fix bugs. We add features. We understand that discipline. We can literally take 95% of that same mindset around product and apply it to this thing called culture. And so here's what happens when you think about culture as a product. You're like, oh, well, I would never build a product without asking the customers what it is they want. Why would you build a culture without asking the employees what it is they want? You would never build a product and not ask for the customers to report bugs that are really kind of prohibiting them from doing what they need to do. Why would you not ask your employees if the culture is prohibiting them from what they need to do? So we've literally taken the idea of culture and made it a product in every conceivable way that we can. And that has
so I love that.
helped.
But what is the right way to bring employees into culture creation process with you? Is it a simple, what would you like in the culture that we have here? What questions do you ask? How do you ask them? How do you get that feedback?
Yeah. So the number one thing is so every company has a culture, whether you deliberately designed it or not. The hope is that by being intentional about it, you can get the culture you want versus one that's kind of thrust upon you. And the kind of second law of thermodynamics is your culture will suck outside of intervention, right? It's like it's entropy. And so the way you kind of involve people is you involve people. And this is a painful process. So I will tell you, I began writing the Culture Code deck. This was, I'll say, maybe 11 years ago, give or take a little bit. And I was kind of volunteered into it by my co-founder, Brian, who had gone to this kind of CEO. He was part of a CEO group that they would kind of sit around and meet and talk about CEO issues and sing CEO songs, sit in a circle and do all that kind of thing. I'm kidding. But they did sit in a circle. And one of the topics one time was around culture and how important culture was. And we were early in our history at this point. And so he comes back to me. We have one of our founders' dinners that are multi-hour affairs. And he's like, Dharmesh, I just got back from my CEO club kind of meetup thing. And the topic was culture. And they're like, culture is like super important. I'm like, awesome, Brian. It's super important. He's like, why don't you go do that? I'm like, I have no idea what you mean. But from what little I know about culture, it involves people. And I'm the least social person in the entire company. I'm the least qualified to do anything related to culture. But I was a team player. I'm like, okay, fine. So I originally treated as a data collection exercise. So my assumption was we already have a culture. We sort of need to and it feels like it's working. People seem to be happy, but let's find that out first. So I ran a survey. It's like, hey, I'm like working on culture at HubSpot. I want to know whether you're happy at HubSpot or not, right? It's a product. And if so, why are you happy? If not, why you're not happy? And a weird thing happened when I sent that first email out to the employee base. People reacted with a negativity that I had never seen in my professional career. And this was weird, caught me off guard. And the kinds of comments I got back is like, oh, so this is what we're doing now. Oh, so now it's going to be like putting mission statements up on the wall. We're going to become one of those companies. And then the one that really got me, and by the way, these are all people I had personally hired and recruited, right? This is not random folks that had never met me. It's like, how can you, just by virtue of even bringing up the topic of culture and asking very benign questions, it was not I did not think that there was going to be this kind of negativity. But the one that really got me is like, oh, Dharmesh, I just don't think HubSpot's the kind of company now that I thought I joined. I'm like, nothing has changed, dude. Like, what is wrong? And so once we got through that, and I kind of talked people off the ledge, and I understood better why they were reacting negatively, is because culture as it had been practiced before was mission statements on the wall and highfalutin words like integrity and this and excellence and whatever. It's like, and that's what they thought we were going down. It's like, okay, well, we've always been a very kind of practical, solve for the customer thing. And now it feels like this was one of those kind of big company things where you bring management consultants in and come up with fancy words like integrity and excellence. And so once I convinced them that was not my intent, once we got through that, and then the first version of the Culture Code deck was out there to answer exactly one question: what kinds of people are likely to succeed at HubSpot? That was, and the way I had framed it in my head, hence the name Culture Code, is if I could write a function, like literally code, what would the kind of coefficients of that function be? I might not know the weights as far as the relative importance of those, but at least let's identify the things that seem to be maybe not causal, but at least correlated with success at HubSpot. And that's when we came up with the original set of what some people call values. I think of them as coefficients or the attributes of people. And transparency was up there. Humility was up there in terms of things. Empathy was up there in terms of the attributes that really kind of stood out. And so once we had that, then we had, it's like, okay, well, these are the kinds of people that seem to succeed at HubSpot and tend to be happy at HubSpot, thereby creating other people that are happy at HubSpot. Let's hire more of those people. So we used it as the baseline for hiring kind of from that point forward. So we would every kind of interview and then every promotion, and we kind of wove it through the entire company that says you have to have, it doesn't have to be 10 out of 10 on each of them, but these are the things we care about. And they're not like excellence, right? They're humility, their transparency, their empathy, adaptability. And so anyway, that's the somewhat long story around the Culture Code deck. But this is, if I had to provide one piece of advice to startups, regardless of where in the kind of stage of evolution you are, the best time to work on culture is time t equals 0. Simultaneous to thinking about the product, think about the people. I'm not suggesting you write 128 slides in that first month, first year, but at least have it on a paper napkin, at least have a conversation with your co-founder that says, this is the kind of company we want to create, and these are the kinds of people that we want to attract. And so the best time is time t equals 0. The next best time is time t equal now. So if you have not done it yet, wherever you are in your overall kind of evolution, start working on it now, start having those conversations.
One of the other big things that Dharmesh is focused on, and the last thing I'm going to talk about today, is strategy and making sure HubSpot continues to take big swings and make big bets. For example, Dharmesh worked on a sort of MVP HubSpot chatbot, an AI tool, which in the future could replace HubSpot's UI. So that when you use the product, you don't have to understand where things are in the UI. You can just ask the chatbot a question and it will produce something for you or tell you how to achieve the result. Now, Dharmesh has a very interesting methodology for evaluating ideas and deciding whether they are worth investing in. He tries to think probabilistically about it and think about both the likelihood of success and also the potential upside. And he explains that it's easy to chase ideas which have a high likelihood of success, but actually if the payoff is not worth it, then ideas are not worth pursuing. So here's a clip of Dharmesh explaining his approach to evaluating ideas.
The three things I look at are like profit potential. Like if this thing went exactly as planned, as the founders envisioned, what could it be? Like, let's just assume all things, like all the stars align, everything works the way you expect it to, and it goes, what could it be? What's the overall potential for the project? What kind of like passion do you have around it? It's like, okay, are you excited about it or not excited about it? And the third one is around probability of that success that you want, right? And I'm a quant-based guy, so I'll take each of those factors, I'll do a 0 to 10 square and multiply them together, and I'll get a score out of 1,000, right? And you can put the weighting differently. It's like, oh, I care more about passion than the profit potential or something else. But the common mistake people make is that they will look at the probability of success first, and almost exclusively as the high-order bit filter. It's like, oh, I had this idea, but the likelihood is like 0.01% that that's actually going to work. And so I'm not even going to think about what the potential could have been or how passionate I may or may not be about it. And then they just kind of discard the idea. I think that is statistically unwise and an impractical move. And here's why, is that the way you should be looking at ideas is you kind of take the profit potential, like here's the possible outcome, multiply this. It's the EV, the expected value statistically of this thing. It's like, oh, I have a 1% chance at $1 billion. The expected value is 1% of $1 billion. That's the value of that particular thing. And so you shouldn't discard something just because the probability is low, because it may have a disproportionately high potential that makes it more interesting than it would otherwise. So that's be a little bit more structured about how you assess things. If people throw things away too easily because, and the second note, I'll put in a hard one lessons. Good ideas are dangerous. And they're dangerous because what you want to find are the great ideas. That's the thing you can kind of get behind. You don't have to find them before you start the company. We can talk about that. So bad ideas are easy to spot. Like, that's just a bad idea. good ideas masquerade as great ideas, and it's hard to tell them apart. And they're the ones that end up kind of spinning a bunch of cycles for you. And it's like, okay, well, it ended up being good, but just failure is not a problem. Like mediocrity is the thing everybody should be fearful of. It's like, just get it out there, try it, see what happens. But anyway.
And mediocrity is the big problem because it wastes the most valuable resource. It wastes time, right? Because it's not going to die quickly, nor is it going to take off. So it is a slow, long burn at a mediocre level. And so you're sort of locking in over a period of time a mediocre outcome. And that's why mediocrity is the biggest risk.
That I think is hardest about bootstrap companies, especially tech companies that have a low kind of capital need, is they can actually live forever and not go anywhere, right? Because it doesn't take that much to, it's like, okay, you've got an AWS instance somewhere that's costing you, it doesn't really cost that much. And you don't have investors pushing on you to say, oh, we need some sort of outcome. And so you can run that company indefinitely and waste a bunch of your time when the next idea that you could have done was sitting right behind it, right? Like I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs by this point. I have never, ever in my entire life met an entrepreneur that had just one idea. It's like, oh, you will have more, dude. It's like, okay,
right.
Try the thing. If you can sell the thing, sell the thing. If you're not that excited about it, or you just want to cash out, take some chips off the table, there's no harm and no shame. But yeah.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed learning about how Dharmesh operates as the CTO of HubSpot.